Hey guys, I got a really great question recently about best practices for creating a sustainable private yoga practice. It's really nicely written, so I'm just going to read it to you as is. She said, I would like to know what are the best practices as far as creating a financially sustainable private yoga practice. Is it about saving income from a full time job and using that as the startup and operational capital? Is it acquiring a business loan from a formal entity? Or is it having a partner that is willing to support you financially while you grow your practice? I know most people will say it depends and that different things work for different people, but truly, what is the method that creates sustainability? I want to teach yoga privately for a long time, and I don't want things to flounder because I started in a direction that was built to fail. Such a good and interesting question, and I'm super excited to dive into this with you. So, there's kind of a few different threads that we need to tug on here. One is what needs to happen so that your practice can grow? What makes it grow in a sustainable way and in a long-lasting way? So that's one question. And then another question is, how much money does it cost to start a private yoga business or private yoga practice? And then third, where is it a good idea to get that money from? So let me just start by saying, mostly what I can do is speak for myself. I have trained hundreds of teachers in the science of a private lesson. And so I've taught them what worked for me, and I've seen it work really well for lots of other people as well. But that said, of course, everybody has different situations and different goals and different needs. So it's not a one size fits all, but I do have some general thoughts about this that I hope are applicable to lots of you. So, first of all, let me just say that I started my private yoga teaching practice without a loan from a bank, without a cent, a dollar saved up from a full-time job, and without a partner. And created and built my private practice first in New York City and then moved it to Washington, D.C. without any of those things. So, I don't think that you need those things necessarily. One thing is, how long does it take to create a private practice that can support you? And what do you do for money in the meantime, right? Because I think that must be the question, because to actually start a private yoga teaching practice, there's not a lot of startup operational costs. You can go to see people in their homes and offices, which is what I did. That's one of the benefits, I think, actually, for younger, newer teachers in particular, of teaching privately, is that there is no startup cost. You don't need to rent a space. You don't need to invest in really expensive scheduling software. You don't need any of that stuff. You need to connect with people. You need to have them be excited to work with you. Use email and your own time and energy to schedule appointments, and you go to see them in their homes. So it's a great way to start because you don't have really that many startup costs. Of course, you do need money, I'm assuming, I know I did, to pay your bills and to live. So here's what you need money for if you're thinking about starting a private teaching practice. You need money for trainings. You need a foundational 200-hour teacher training. Ideally, you need some kind of training in the specific skills that you need to teach really high-quality one-on-one private lessons. We'll get to that more in a second. Side note, I teach those. And you need, ideally, a little bit of training and education in if you didn't get a good foundation in this in your initial training, anatomy, biomechanics, therapeutics, working with, people who could not do an open level group class but need some kind of special modifications, whether it's trauma sensitive yoga, yoga for people with bigger bodies, yoga for people with cancer. A lot of the times people who do private lessons are people who don't feel comfortable in group classes, so you will need some kind of specialty training. So you definitely need some money to take some initial trainings before you get too far into this. So you need money for that. And but then besides your normal living costs, you don't really need any extra money. You also, it's helpful if you have a little bit of a flexible schedule. If you work really solid, 8 to 5, 9 to 5, 5 days a week, and you have kids at home, it's not that you can't start teaching privately. It's just that you won't have that many open slots. It's fine. People do it all the time. I've coached people who have schedules and lives like that, and they've slowly taken on a private client here and a private client there, and it's built well. So I don't want to be like a Debbie Downer. If that's your life and your schedule, you can still absolutely take on private clients. It just will take longer to have enough clients to potentially maybe leave your full-time job. If you have, let's say, 3 or 4 time slots in your week that you can see private clients, it's going to take a while to get 4 clients. But if you have 10 or 15 open slots where you could put people, you'll get 4 clients much faster, because it just means that you're more flexible, you have more time slots open, and you have more options to offer people. Like in my life now, I have, my schedule is very full. All my private clients have standing appointments. I have all this other work I do with teachers. So I really only have right now like 1, maybe 2 slots that aren't permanently taken by somebody. But I would love for them to be filled. I'd love for every spot to be filled. But what that means is when I get contacted with or connected with a new client, I really only have 1 spot to offer them. So it has to be the right person and the right situation and the right setup for that to work. So again, if you have limited time, it's not that you can't start teaching privately. It just will take a little bit longer when you have less time to offer people. If you have more time, flexible time, especially before work hours, after work, on the weekends, that's when a lot of people want to do private yoga. And so if you have some of those time slots free, that's great. So again, like startup costs, you need your money to live, pay your bills, do what you need to do. You need money for trainings. And ideally, if you have a little bit of flexible time, that works really well. But you don't need money for a website. You can do a very simple website yourself for not that much money. You definitely don't need to spend a lot of money on a website. So you don't need a website. You don't need, I'm not sure, I'm trying to imagine what people are thinking about they have for startup costs. You don't need fancy software that does anything. You don't need to film videos like this. You don't need a camera or a microphone or lighting. You don't need a social media account. You literally don't need any of that. What you need ideally is some exposure to yoga students. So 1 or 2 group classes on the schedule at places that are comfortable with you taking private clients from. And you need to show up consistently to those group classes. But best practice, in my opinion, for creating a sustainable, long-term private practice is to have students that are deeply engaged in their practice and very committed to their work and their work with you. Over and over and over again in my life and in the teachers who have studied with me, I've seen that be what makes the difference. You don't need some super complicated, fancy strategy for getting new clients. I can help you with some strategy to get new clients. It's not that that's totally unimportant, but if you have clients who do 2 or 3 or 4 sessions or even work with you for 3 or 4 months and then flake out, you're going to have to keep getting new clients. So having a strategy for getting new clients can't be the end of the story. That's just the very first baby step. And then what really makes your private practice sustainable over the long term is to teach your students very well in a way that is deeply meaningful and accessible and supportive of them and their goals and their life and what they feel like they need and what they feel like they want, so that they make the physical and emotional and financial commitment to seeing you once a week. When you have students like that, then you don't have to constantly look for new clients. and you can assume a certain amount of income per month. Now, there are some things, it's a cyclical business, so there are quieter times. Maybe in August in your town, lots of people go out of town, and so you don't see all of your private clients that month, so it's a slower month for you. There are definitely things that you can do to prepare financially for those ups and downs, and that's something, I can go more into in depth if you guys are interested. But what makes a practice sustainable is how committed your students are. That's really the bottom line of it. So we can go more in depth into some of the business questions that you guys might have, but in terms of like operational startup costs, outside of your daily needs and your family's needs and a couple foundational trainings, there are no other foundational startup costs. And I would not take, because a private yoga teaching practice is cyclical, I do now have all these students that are very committed that I know I can count on, they're still human people, So like I had clients who I saw 4 times a week, and out of nowhere, they decided to move. I knew they were planning to move in a couple of years, but some things changed and they moved like basically without a moment's notice. And so that left me with 4 open slots. And that was when I was very new to DC. I had just restarted my practice here and I was just kind of like getting my footing. So that was a really big hit, and that was stressful. And there will be little things like that happen. So because of the inherent risk of a service-based business, I would not take out a loan. And if it's possible to fit private teaching into your life as it exists now, which is how I would recommend you start, then you don't need to take out a loan. You just add a little bit of work onto top of what you're already doing. Now, when I started teaching, I was super young and I didn't have a family. I didn't have anybody I had to take care of. So that right away was like a different situation for me. It was sort of easier for me to have a lot of expansive time, to be super flexible about when I saw people, and to spend a lot of time hustling. So my practice grew quite quickly. I did my teacher training in the summer of 2005. By that fall, I was teaching close to 10 yoga classes a week at gyms and kind of scattered all over the place. January 2006, I got my first private client. And that took a little bit of time to build. 6 months, I got my second client. Maybe 6 more months, I got my third client. But then it snowballed super quickly. And I was teaching 25 private clients a week within another year. So there's lots of ways in which I just was lucky and am privileged that I did start this career in a place where I didn't have other people to take care of. So I had the capacity to really grow super quickly. But if you're not in that place, that's not to say that you can't start teaching this way and that you can't start getting those really deeply committed clients. You will probably not grow quite as fast as I did. And you don't need to. There's no reason. I didn't need to grow that fast either. That was just sort of like what happened in my life at the time. So I would not take out a loan. I would continue doing everything that you're doing. I would make sure you're teaching group classes. And then I would make sure that you know how to teach really excellent private lessons in a way that meets your students' deepest needs on all levels: physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, in a way that's accessible to them, and in a way that likely a lot of other yoga teachers might not be able to support them, so that they become super committed to you and your work together. So that's my sort of first level of advice about creating a sustainable private yoga practice. Let me know what follow-up questions you have, and I can definitely do more videos on these topics if you guys are interested. Okay, bye for now.